Hello and welcome. My name is Asaf, and I'm here with Mr. Ari Hoenig.
Perfect.
Ari, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Sure. My pleasure.
So I wanted to start with your rhythmic approach and really how you got to some of those concepts and ideas that you display in the music that you play.
hmm
What was your inspiration to explore these rhythms?
Sure. So I think, basically that feeling of building tension, which you can do. That's what really struck me about rhythm and rhythmic development. It was a way to build tension, and then, the more tension that you could build, the resolution was kind of even more powerful. Um,
Right.
Even more kind of ecstatic, like. And so, I would go to clubs when I was in Philly, when I was growing up in Philly, and go to jazz clubs and see the bands play, and they would sometimes kind of play these like repetitive figures where maybe the drums would play along with the other comping instruments, bass and piano, or guitar or whatever, and they would kind of play these same rhythms, these same ideas, what we know as polyrhythms, and they would go over the bar line, and then at some point they would all come out together. And when they came out, the audience would always be like, "Yeah, woohoo!" They would be cheering, and it would be like this really kind of um, uh, just like a euphoric type of sensation, and so that's when I started getting into not only figuring out and understanding what the rhythms that were being played, that I was watching, but also what other possibilities there might be, to get into rhythmically, to basically like push that idea further and to be able to do more with that. So that was really the inspiration. Yeah.
Right, and I know from some of your educational videos that you kind of developed your own system to develop that aspect and work on that. Could you talk a little bit about how someone can practice and get to those rhythmic the understanding of these rhythmic ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I did develop it. It's pretty much the way that I practice this kind of stuff. And then later on, I started teaching, and then it all kind of started coming together into a method. And so now it's a method I've been using for quite a while now, and it's called rhythm training. Actually a series of three short videos that I have up on my music masterclass. And That's mymusicmasterclass.com, where they have all the videos there.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll link below
okay,
in the
yeah.
text. Yeah.
So basically, and I've heard that, from some people, that this method has been, similar, a little bit similar to the South Indian way I mean, obviously it's coming from a completely different style, but some things are similar anyway.
Of course.
Basically, uh, although I have to say that it doesn't involve, and I don't know how you say this, but for example, when you put a rhythm like 5/4 or over 2 or 7/2, there's none of that. So, and I know that Carnatic is, I know that there's going to have that, that aspect of it too. But in this case, we're really only dealing with the subdivisions of duple and triple meter, because I feel that that's 99% of the time what we're going to be playing. And obviously it will apply to other subdivisions as well. But it's basically just a system. Rhythm training is just a system of singing, because that's the most important, is that you're always in the song. You're always singing the song. And so you can count as well, but really I'm always thinking in a song, and the song can be subdivided. Like, you can, for instance, use just a jazz standard, um, where you're singing 1, 2, 3, 4, ba da ba da ba da ba ba. Right, it's C jam blues. 3, 4, da 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 ba da ba da. And then while you're singing the melody, you're going to clap. Ba-da, 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 ba-da. You're going to clap a rhythm that falls within this triplet subdivision, which is the subdivision of the melody, right? Which is here, 2, 3, 4, right? So, for example, if I wanted to clap, a rhythm like groupings of 7 triplets over it, it might sound like this: 3, 4, ba-da, 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 3, 4, ba-da, 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 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, ba-da. Okay, so that's just one possible rhythm, or I should say possible grouping, because there's a lot of rhythms that apply to each grouping as well. In other words, things that could fit within that 7 partials or whatever. So basically, that system, the rhythm training system, that I've developed is those 2 components, which is singing a melody and clapping or tapping a rhythm along with that melody. And doing that for a long time, I would do that, walking from class to class with headphones on, listening to music live, listening to music on records, just doing it along with that. And by doing that, I was able to teach myself rhythmic vocabulary that I'd never heard anybody else play. I just kind of conceived it on my own and then developed it in my ear, just from practicing it.
Yes, and internalizing it, of course.
That's what made me internalize. That's how I could internalize it, is just practicing it by singing a melody or practicing along with, listening to records.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What would you say, Ari, the connection between rhythmic understanding and coordination? Because obviously you're doing a couple of things. You're singing and then you're clapping something very different. So what would you say, is there a physical role that contributes to our rhythmic understanding when we incorporate that coordination thing? I'm asking also because I know that a lot of your exercises and practices involve a lot of 4-way coordination and so on.
I mean, it's also coordination, even if you're like, let's say you didn't have any arms, right? Or let's say you didn't have any legs or arms, right? And you still can do 2 things at once. You could sing a melody and you could cluck out something on your, with your tongue. So like there's always coordination is a inherent part of that. It doesn't have to be coordination between your 2 hands, but it is coordination in your brain that's making it happen. It can be coordination, so for example, because somebody can't sing the melody or doesn't sing the melody doesn't mean that they're not able to understand where the one is, or where the song is. Keeping it in your brain, you can compartmentalize it. You can keep it in one place and then keep the rhythm that you're playing in another place. So but what I feel is that the more coordination, the more ways that you can perform this with different types of coordination. For example, drummers have 4 limbs, right? We also have our voice, so that's already 5 possibilities. The more ways that you can kind of play this stuff, the stronger that it's going to get within you. So if I can play 4 against 3 between my right hand and right foot, cool. But before I learned to play 4 against 3 between my left hand and left foot, when I learned that, my feeling of 4 against 3 is going to get even stronger. And then if I learn it between my left hand and right foot, it's going to get even stronger than that. And then if I'm going to be able to say the 4 and then tap the 3 with one of my feet, it's even stronger. See?
Yeah, really. That's really an interesting aspect of rhythmic understanding, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's another thing I really wanted to ask you your opinion about, something that's been intriguing me for a long time, about how do you see the difference between timekeeping and time phrasing? And is there a difference? And in your exercises, there's a bit of both. There's both, basically. But could you speak about how you see that difference in what we are doing on the drums and writing and playing and whatever?
I mean, I guess it just depends on your definition, right? I mean, so I suppose that I hear timekeeping more referring to accompaniment.
Yes.
When you're accompanying a soloist or accompanying something, so your playing is kind of more in the background. And then phrasing has to do with to me, what that means, phrasing means the particular. How do I put this? Because I don't want to say something that's vague. I don't want to say, I don't want to be abstract here. So phrasing is really the very particular points of the time within increments of the time, and also it could be dynamics too. How you play something. It's not just the feeling that you play it with, but it's actually like the feel. The feel. It's to me, somebody that has good phrasing will play something and it'll make you kind of want to dance. It'll make you want to move a little bit, like want to move and groove. But to be able to do that, there's also like some very technical things that come with that as well. Basically, it has to do with being consistent, being very consistent with your time, and so that means you're consistent with your quarter notes, and you're consistent with where you place your subdivisions, and you're consistent with your dynamics. And so phrasing has a lot to do with being able to play something that others can trust, your listeners can trust, and kind of like rely on to be there. And that's the feeling that they can get when they when that'll make them dance, because they rely on you, they trust you, and then it can make them. So I feel that that phrasing is more or less that. So those two are pretty different definitions. That's how I hear them.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. There's another thing I really wanted to ask you about, and you were speaking about the feeling, about the feel thing, and jazz today and jazz of like 50 years ago, 40 years ago was very, for me, when I listened to it, was very different in feel. The feel was different. How do you see the difference between metric accuracy and the feeling of groove and swing, and how does that relate to one another, and especially in the realm of modern jazz?
Oh, that's interesting. Um,
How far have we come in that sense? I mean, what I'm asking, I mean, when I see someone like, say, Art Blakey,
right.
it's like his whole body is dancing. And I'm not saying anything about who is better or worse, but some of the current guys quite stiff and quite metrically accurate and ironized, so to speak.
Well, look, I mean, I'm actually, look, for me, I think that there's a lot of value in being able to understand time well enough that you can, and I'm not saying that, that everybody should play with, metric perfection. But I think there's a lot of value in being able to hear what it sounds like to play, in good time, to play consistent time, and what it sounds like when somebody's rushing or when somebody's dragging, and not just a drummer, but anybody on the bandstand. What it sounds like when a bass player is rushing and the drummer's not, as opposed to the drummer's rushing and the bass player's not. Like there's all this stuff. So for me, all these things are very important. These are things that I teach all the time, and this doesn't have to do with your choices when you play, but it has to do with your ears and how you hear. So those things are definitely important to me. But it's important to know that these aren't things that are going to necessarily affect your emotional qualities when you play. So I mean, having good time, having precise time, having that knowledge of tempo or evenness or of any of that stuff is not necessarily going to give you an emotional quality of your playing. You have to dig down and get that from you, from somewhere else. You have to get that from emotion, actually, from feeling. So when you're playing, you talk about Art Blakey. Uh, I could kind of go off, from some other players that I know that were definitely not perfect, perfectly playing in time. But there was a certain kind of emotional feeling that you got, and to me, that's the thing that actually makes the music. That's actually what what makes something, really special. Is the feeling that, you get when you listen to it, or somebody else gets when they listen to that music. So, one thing is skill and the other thing is feeling, right? So they're different. They're different things.
Yeah.
But I think that both are very important.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I guess you got to get your accuracy first, and you got to get that down first before you can add to that embellishment and swing.
I don't know about that. Not necessarily. I didn't. I definitely didn't, because I had a lot of the other thing way before I was trying to be. I didn't hear precise time until I really tried to. And it was much later for me. Talking about ages like 8. I started maybe when I was 18 trying to hear that stuff and not being successful. And it took me 10 years after that to like have some modicum of success, like with hearing time. And I'm not talking about rhythm. I'm talking about time. Timing, being precise timing. It definitely took a lot. But I definitely had plenty of emotion, no problem. I was going for it all the time.
That's great. That's great. Fantastic. Ari, can you show us if you have an exercise, a rhythmic exercise that you're working at the moment, or do you have anything in mind that you're working at the moment in terms of rhythmic concepts and so on?
Yeah, sure. So like, for example, and I deal with a lot of swing type of stuff anyway, so I'll just keep it in that vein. But if you're thinking in a kind of like a slow, right, like kind of a triplet groove, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So instead of subdividing in triplets, I will subdivide in sextuplets, twice that fast. Right? That's how I'm hearing it. But it doesn't mean that you have to play all of them. So
Yeah.
so I'm really hearing that
Yeah.
sextuplet subdivision.
A lot of anticipation within the sextuplets, right?
Yeah, it's that subdivision of sextuplets. It's right, the groupings within. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because it sounds like in your bass drum and snare you're doing a different rhythm to what you're doing in the
Yeah.
completely displaced. And you were speaking about this in the beginning. That feeling of tension and release is definitely there. Is definitely there. Yeah.
Yeah. It actually is something that is very precise, but it creates an illusion of being emotional. And I mean, it is too, but it sounds more like it's a feel thing than it's a precise, thing from you to the outside. Because I would be able to hear this the kind of thing being played. For instance, I might record myself playing it, and I wasn't thinking it when I was listening to it. But I do think that way when I'm playing. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic, man. It's been really, really informative and it's great. Thank you so much for having,
Of course. Yeah.
for giving us
Thank
this
you.
time.
Thank you for asking me, Asaf. Great questions, man. Really
Thank
interesting conversation. And I'd say for anybody out there that is interested in checking me out, I have a Patreon page that I put out all my videos on now for the last couple of years, and it's like a little club. So we just talk to each other and ask, you can ask questions and talk to me about stuff. But basically, I put out 3 videos a month about whatever topics that I'm kind of into at the time when I'm dealing with. But they're usually drumming related and very often rhythm related. And some of the stuff can get pretty in depth, I guess, as I'm sure that your students know about.
Yeah, I'm sure I would really absolutely recommend anyone who is listening, viewing this interview now to go ahead and check. Links will be below. So Ari, thank you so much for your time,
Yeah.
and I'm looking forward to see you sometime in person. Thank you.
Thank you, Asaf.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, man.
Nice one.